All right. So I know a lot of people in this room, quite a few of you I've met this time or I've met you in the past. So my name is Amos King. I am the founder of a company called Binary Noggin. You guys won't believe this. Guess what we do? We write software. That's my pitch. Okay, so now I feel like everybody knows me. So on the count of three, I just want everybody to shout your name. So 1, 2, 3. All right, now we all know each other. I heard Ben. I'm not going to say your name because I already know you. Anyway, so the reason that I needed to know everybody's name is because now that we trust each other, I rewrote all of my slides and everything in the last like 24 hours while I was on an adventure trying to get here. Yeah, I got like 45 minutes of sleep. It was wild. If you want to know about it, you can look at my Twitter or you can come talk to me. But the reason it's really important for us to know each other is because I have 3 games, and these games are called Tell Me Why I'm Bad. So I wrote all the code on these slides, from a project, but I needed to change them up to show the right thing. So tell me if you see any typos. If something won't compile, I mean, tell me these at the end. Please don't shout it out in the middle of it, unless you want to see me flounder. Come say hello. I love people. I am a huge extrovert, and so it's wonderful being back at a conference. And then if you have ways that you think that I can improve my speaking ability, I love feedback. Even if you're like, hey, just don't. Like, that's great feedback. So come talk to me. Come say hello. All right, so acceptance tests. How many people have written acceptance tests? Sometimes they call them functional tests. Say half the time aren't functional. So I guess, what is an acceptance test? For anybody who hasn't written one, this is a definition I pulled off of a C2 wiki, which is a wiki geared towards software developers. It's all about software. It's really like a giant conversation. It's really interesting to read. So a formal test to determine whether or not a system satisfies acceptance criteria. Should I be talking into the microphone? Can everybody hear me? Do you need me in the microphone? Okay. I'm going to carry it with me then, because I don't like to stand still. So I like this definition, except for one little problem. Like, let's not get so serious. I don't like that word. Actually, can everybody just point at the screen real quick and yell pew? There, let's just get rid of it entirely. All right, perfect. So a test to determine whether or not a system satisfies acceptance criteria. That sounds really simple, right? So I guess there's a few things in there. What is a system? So to me, a system is, it's not just your like little piece of the pie. Like, let's say you're a back-end developer. It's not just that. It's everything all together, top to bottom. Today we're going to concentrate on web applications, but you can write acceptance tests for anything. The other part is acceptance criteria. So acceptance criteria are the things that your users or your clients expect to happen. Right, those are the acceptance criteria. Some people, if you've done Ruby in the past, a lot of people have done capybara testing. Or you've heard of Cucumber. They write these as given, when, and then. I really love that format for talking to customers. Every time a customer asks me something, I just rewrite it in that format and send it back to them. And then after a while, they start sending it to me that way, and I don't even have to think anymore. It's beautiful when I can just write code and not think. So why do you want this? These are like the 3 things that they say that you get whenever you're doing acceptance testing. It encourages collaboration. So whenever you simplify things down, especially if you make them really tiny, you can really get your customers to start writing and being a part of the situation instead of them glazing over and thinking about back-end work and all the things that we have to deal with. You define the expectations that you have. So if you have an acceptance test, and especially if you've automated it, and whenever it passes, whenever you hand it to your client, you at least have some small level of whether it meets their requirements or not. A lot of times you end up wanting to write more acceptance tests after, or like you get feedback and you add to these. And then the other thing is with automated, you can use them to find bugs. And if you want to have a lot of fun, you can start to combine some of the stuff we're doing today with property testing and really ruin your life. There it goes. So I wanted to add this, automated. Because if you're just like talking about it and you're just putting it down in words, you're missing out. You're missing out on so much more. So I guess in Elixir, what do we need to get started? Well, we need a little Mick Jagger to start us up. No, I didn't make him sing, so too bad. So we have these tools available to us. So Wallaby is a framework for reaching out to a browser and automating running the browser. It's all in Elixir. Chris Keithley started it. Mitch, I can't think of his last name right now. He's not here, so who cares? Haha, Mitch, is the maintainer of it now. It works with Chromedriver or Selenium. Selenium's great if you want to run a bunch of different browsers so that then you never have to look at IE again. And I'm working on insurance software right now in the construction industry, so I get to support IE 11. Yay! I don't want to run it, and I also don't want to try it in a bunch of browsers. So that's really good. But we're not going to talk about Selenium today because it's actually a lot more setup. So really, we're just going to use these two. So how do you get started? Add that to your mixed steps file. That's the easy part. Then we've got Install Chromedriver. This is on the Mac. If you're not on the Mac, you'll have some kind of way to do this. It's really not that hard. And then Chrome, you need to install Chrome. Go ahead and download Chrome. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. Everything will be great. And then you start writing tests like this. So this is a basic acceptance test. So this visit, fill in, click, has CSS. These come from Wallaby. So does the query CSS. That comes from Wallaby. So most of these queries are CSS selectors. There's also a way to use XPath. XPath is really powerful. It's really hard to read. And every time your designer starts changing things, you have to rewrite your XPath, so I avoid it. So in this test, can I get a volunteer? Okay. Have you ever written these before? Oh, that's cheating. Can I get somebody who's never written? No, you haven't? No. All right, Matthias. Can you tell me what is happening here?
Pretty sure the first step is it's going to send the browser to user/login. Then it's going to identify something with the ID username field, and it's going to fill it in with the user email that it inherited from the test context. And then it's going to find the password field. It's going to fill that in with the user password. And then it's going to click on something that looks like it has some,
we'll get to that.
And then it's going to insert there some CSS.
Right, so yeah, we're logging in to the system, and then we're making sure that it has the user menu now. So what could be so bad about that? Has anybody done this before? They've written them enough? Okay, so go ahead. If you've written these before, just kind of shout out some of the problems that you've run into. Timing? Is that what you said?
Yeah, like element hasn't period.
Yeah, that's a big one. CSS changes, yeah. Stupid designers. Asynchronous calls, yeah. That's the other thing. Installing Chrome, I should say on there, your Chromedriver version must match your Chrome version. As soon as it doesn't, you get these stupid weird errors that like say you have an ID that's not right, and you're like, what? I have no idea what this means. Yeah. So you've kind of covered most of what. So some of the things that make them brittle. Failing for insignificant changes. Those are designers or like a wording change on your site. Readability and duplication. So you write all these steps like visit and fill in all over the place. And then as soon as somebody wants to change that front end, now you've got to change it in 85 places. Seemingly random failures, timing issues. I lost a slide in here, but if anybody uses Circle CI, there's this rerun from failed button, and it becomes team's favorite button. The other button is commenting out the test just to move on. Neither one of those are acceptable solutions to any problem in life. It's like if you have major problems and then instead of talking it through, you just hide them in a closet, it's bound to come back and bite you. Don't do that. And then they're slow. Really, really slow. So yeah, you don't want to run them all the time. Okay, so what's good about them? Why do we continue? They're top to bottom. So that they're running the browser, they're running everything. And I know some people are like, well, who cares? I've got front end, I've got controller tests. They used to call them controller tests. I've got some live view tests. I have things that are actually checking that part of my system. Well, you're missing the JavaScript on your front end. And then some people, I've brought this up and somebody said, well, I don't have any JavaScript in their front end. I'm doing a live view app. You have a lot of JavaScript, and trust me, there's some things that happen in live view where it takes forever. It'll blow your mind when things don't update, or when they do, or they update and then you switch pages and suddenly they're not updated and you're like, wait, I updated that. So you got to deal with that. It's great for impressing customers. So there's a way to run this in a headed mode. By headed, I mean that it's going to run the browser. Hopefully this starts automatically. Oh, there it goes. Okay. So these are actual tests for one of our clients. I got there okay. When I show them this, they're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This makes them slower, so you don't want to run them in headed mode. But it's pretty awesome how fast that goes. And how fast that goes actually leads to a lot of those timing issues, because that can click through things way faster than you can. So it'll look for things on the screen that aren't there yet, even though, according to you, they feel like nearly real time. Okay, what else do we have? Multiple platforms. So if you run Selenium, again, you can try this on IE. You can try it on Firefox. You can try it on multiple versions of Firefox. You can try it on multiple versions of Chrome. It finds all kinds of amazing bugs that you would never expect and saves the day because you don't have somebody calling you at 11 o'clock at night saying, I can't put anything in. And you're like, stop using IE 11. That's really the solution. And then sometimes it saves the day, and that makes happy developers. Does anybody know this guy? He's in the back of the room. Give him a hard time later. It's Connor Rigby. So how do we go from this to this? Because I want to be a happy developer. So first, we had an anatomy a little earlier. So first we need to find elements. Okay, does anybody know who this is? This is Dmitry Mendeleev. So he created the periodic table. So he's finding elements. Ha! Yes, somebody laughed. So how do we find elements? So CSS selectors. This is like the quick crash course in CSS selectors. So if you see a pound in front of something, this is an ID. So this is Texas 12, the 12th Texas. Or actually, when I wrote it, I was thinking transactions. And then I got here and I'm like, oh, we're in Texas. This is going to be funny. Sometimes your jokes hit, sometimes they don't. So attributes. So this is an HTML attribute. So if you say role equals something on your HTML attribute, now you can find by the HTML attributes. So there you go, Jeffrey. This is what you missed earlier. Yeah, failure. And you can combine them. So these are nested elements. So I have a transaction with ID 12, and somewhere underneath that I have an element that says role total. And I'm actually using roles for very good reasons, and that is designers, which we'll talk about later. There are also some special selectors. This is supposed to be a guy panning for gold. How many people think that he's trying to eat soup while going poop in the river? Because that's totally what I thought was going on. And he's dropping his soup, losing his meatballs. So these are some special selectors that I find really useful. There are quite a few different selectors in CSS, but checked, looking for a field that's checked, disabled, enabled fields, things that are invalid if you're using HTML5 validations. This is really useful because otherwise they're almost impossible to find, or valid if you want to check if a field's valid. So yeah, we're back to our original thing. So now if you didn't see what was going on, hopefully you do. And we're gonna break this down a little bit. So right here, what is happening whenever we run these, and this runs right into those timing issues, is that you have a test process, And it's, when you run this right here, session, it's really kind of a bad name. It's what's in the docs, so that's why I used it. But that is really like a piece of data that points at a connection to the browser so that you can tell that connection what to do. If you inspect it, it never changes through the whole thing because all of that state is actually on the browser. And so here we're trying to click something with a login button. So we send this CSS selector over to the browser through Chromedriver in our case. The browser looks for that thing. It may not get it because maybe it's not loaded. And then it tries to look again, and it tries to look again for a certain amount of time that's configurable. You can pass it in at this level, or you can pass it in as a configuration for your entire project. When it finally gets to the end and it hasn't found that, that's when you get an error. Well, yeah, in this case we get an error. If we had an assertion or something, we might get back a false. All right, so insignificant failures. The designer changes everything. So, all right, who's this? Anybody know who this is? Come on, we're in Houston. We're not in Houston. I was in Houston on the way here. It is with NASA. So this is Gene Kranz he was in Houston during Apollo 13 when they had all kinds of problems, and he said failure is not an option. So you can't just rerun it when it fails. Sorry, you're not allowed to fail. So these are really a lot of things. If your tests have these selectors, like I'm looking for a section that is blue or a table, then the designer comes in, they're like, you know what, I want to use a div instead of a section. Or this should be an article. Or I'm going to change it to green. Then your tests all start failing. So I avoid any classes. I also avoid putting my own classes. Like I'll put them in and they're not linked to the design. But the front-end developer comes in there and they're like, I'm not using any of these classes, and they start deleting things. And one thing that you can do is make them fix their own if they fail it. They'll change that. But really, we shouldn't care if they change it from a section to an article. That's why I use roles. About the only time that I use these type of selectors is with an ID, because an ID is something that you control. The other thing that I use a lot is this query text. So you put in that query CSS that we had earlier, drop one of these in here, and now you can look for this text being in an element. This is a really bad way to find a button. That's why I put it up here as an example, because now they want to change the button from save to create or some other word, and you start to fail. So if you're going to look for text, make sure it's text that you control through your tests. Like here I say, if the user didn't input it, and the user was you in your test, if it's not inputting it, don't look for it. So if you have a user that puts in their username, now you can look for the username. But if it's text that is part of the design, don't look for it. You're shooting yourself in the foot. All right, so what's next? Expectations, assertions, right? So this one's going to be easy. Who knows who that is? Charles Dickens, right, Great Expectations. I hated that book. They made me read it. So what do expectations look like? Can anybody spot the bug here? See, this is why this is hard. This is actually something that I wrote probably with Chad. I won't blame you, Chad. It's probably me. And there's a huge bug here. This sometimes passes and sometimes fails. Okay, so remember earlier we had this right here? Do what? The second assert, the not exist. That's right. So if I have this assertion, so I assert that I have some transaction 12. We talked about this earlier. It goes from the test process and it tells the browser to look for something. The browser is going to find this. If it doesn't find it, it'll loop and wait a certain amount of time, right? So as soon as it finds it, it sends back to the test process, I found this. Okay, so refute. Now it happens. I say, find this on the page. I've tried to delete it, right? The page hasn't updated yet. I send over here, I say, find this. It says, oh, I found it. Sends it back over here, and now our test says, oh, well, it's still on the page. I just needed to wait another second. Or a millisecond, like it may be no time at all. So I know people are like, oh, I know what I'll do. I'll assert not. I might have tried this. Don't tell anybody, please. So what can I do? Here's what we really need to do. Oh, that was a wonderful transition there. So instead of asserting not, I say find this when the count is 0. Now I send over to the browser and I say find basically when this isn't there. And now the browser will check, oh yeah, I still have one. Yeah, I still have one. I still have one. Oh, now I don't have one, and it'll send it back. Or if it gets to the very end of its timing, it'll send back. The other thing when you start sending these over is that if you are going to have a failure here, because it's doing that loop, these tests get longer. So it's really beneficial to you to write passing tests because it'll run faster. So this was that original. So now, like everybody, when you look at this, you should go, oh crap, that's not going to work. So I had to get rid of the exists and just make 2 different ones. So I have the not row. It's a beautiful name with count 0 or the row. And I just look for, so if it's added, I look for a row with that company name. I lost my text. This was, oh yeah, no, there it is, query text. Whew, no typos, hopefully. So this is the rewrite of that. So now to check absent, I'm checking for a row that doesn't exist on the browser. That's the important part. All right, readability. Anybody know who this is? Oh, why would I put him up here? Did you see this? Maybe this will help. For those of you who know him, everybody knows him because of this balls, but yeah, he created the first modular homes. So we understand duplication, right? Anybody who's done programming for a while, we try to encapsulate things. So we go from this, and we create modules that have these functions, which are a whole lot better. Like, is this how you talk to a customer? I fill in the username, I fill in the path. No, you say I log in. I log into the site. So site login, I assert that they're logged in, I assert the user menu. So you can use these modules, can be site level, things that happen on every page. They can be page level, which I lost in my refactor here. So pretend that this says project page logged in, there we go, or something like that. Or this is like a component level. So you can build these, and that way, a lot of times you might have a user menu on multiple pages. You can make the page itself, if there's an action that they would normally run on a page, use those internally to that module if you need to encapsulate further. But now whenever you have a change, whenever they change from using, login is something that you have to always do on the front end when you're trying to run these. So if they want to change to using OAuth, you change it in one place. And now everything gets to take advantage of it. Whoop. Who knows what I was doing here? This might have been at like 3 o'clock in the morning in the airport when I was trying to get here. This is the site. So this is one of the functions from the site I thought I would put up here. So navigate is another function. This is what it does. I commented it out so that you could see what it does. So I'll create functions for navigating to pages. Those are in the pages. That way if URLs change, I'm only changing them in one place. We find the login form. So this is the thing, it's weird, is this actually takes in a session and returns a session, and it looks the same, but actually after I've done a find, this is trying to fill in within this form. So it hides that change from you because it only happens in the browser. There's no way for you to see that except for to find the find right before that. It's one of the major drawbacks that I found. We got some account fixtures, fill it in with a password. So this valid user password always returns the same password, and all of my users in my tests use the same password. That's probably a failure on my part. And then here's here's one of my favorites. We've used this over and over. This is a context menu. So it's like the little 3-dot menu that a lot of times you get where you click it and it opens up a menu and then you can find things within it. So it's just another example of doing it at a component level instead of a site or a page level. We'll come back to that later. So seemingly random failures, timing issues. I think this is the last person. Somebody know who this is? Rudolph, I don't know how to say his last name, Clausius. So he came up with entropy, theory of entropy. So randomness, I guess. So I have a definition, I call them transitions. So these are things that happen on a page that you need to wait for before you do the next thing. So I got a little example. I want you to count how many transitions you see in the next video. I better talk faster. If you can't read it, the reading is not really important. But it does say ElixirConf, distributed at example.com, and Jim Iceman. That was my Jim Freeze joke. Nobody laughed. Too busy counting. All right. How many transitions did you see? 15. Whoa. That's a lot. 1,000? A dozen. All right, good. Anybody else? 6-ish. You're at 9. Somebody else said 10. I think there was 10. There might be 12. There might be 15. This is hard, right? Because when you're thinking as a user, when you use a website, you think, I click this and then I click that. You don't think I click this and my mind actually waits for that menu to open. And when you're thinking as the computer, you need to tell it to wait for that menu to open. So one more time, but with feeling. I'm going to help this time. Here's my 10, so tell me if they're wrong. I have these beautiful red dots for you to see. I gave away one of them here beforehand, but that's all right, the menu. That's not the browser. Sorry. I tried to get rid of it and I couldn't get it to go away. Oh, yeah.
I was just looking at all your tabs.
I usually close them at the end of the day, which is really wild. I'm very much a no tab. I hate having lots of tabs. All right, so that was all. So I hope that you saw them with my little hints there. Maybe you counted a different number, but it was good. So how can we wait for things? Yeah, that's how. I like that some people are like, yeah, and some people are like, no. This is a quick go-to, and it feels good to get you over the hump until it doesn't work. Or I already said they're slow, and now you've just introduced slowness that you can't take away, right? We pass in, we use this find function instead, and it sends out to the browser, and as soon as it actually finds it, it stops and comes back. And so you might not wait the whole time, but if you do the process sleep, you're going to wait the whole time every time. And it gets really bad when you start using these modules that are context modules, and now you've added sleeps all over the place that you didn't even realize. And you can change, I've seen a test suite go from like 5 minutes to 10 minutes with like 200 millisecond sleeps in it because it was super dependent, like everything depended on like a context menu. And I fail at this every day. Like I will write a test that uses a context menu like for the first time on a project, and I forget to wait for it to open. These are things that I learned in Ruby 10 years ago, and I'm writing today, and I'm like, oh yeah, they haven't figured out how to not make me remember I need to do that. So context menu, that's the context menu. I just wanted to throw that up there before we went to this. So this is that wait, right? So I click to open the menu, and then I wait to see that the menu is actually there. I don't know why I did a class and a role. Don't write the code on your slides. That's the answer to that. But so this is that waiting for the context menu to open, then I can move on. Right? Then I can let somebody, and remember, find does return a session, but it also puts you within this context, and you may not want to be in that context when you open, so make sure you return your original session. All right, so this is taking forever, like this talk. So how do we make this simpler? All right, who's this? Rich Hickey. He's making life simple. Easy versus simple. If you haven't seen that talk, it's a really good one. You should go watch it. So this is one of the things that I do, is we have a functional test case that we create that all of our tests inherit or do a use on. So, you know, like if you're doing Phoenix, you have, I don't remember any of them. Somebody want to shout one? Con case, yeah. So it's just like you're making a new case. And if you throw into your using this module tag, Wallaby or acceptance or whatever you want to put in there, you can be like slow as crap. And then when you're running them locally, or at least if you're not caring about that one, you run exclude Wallaby, split your builds. If you have automated builds, have one of them run this, that'll run all of your unit tests, and then one of them that runs only Wallaby. And then here's this module tag target. So when I am working on an individual, oh, I didn't change that. That should just say tag. Shh. Okay. So module tag, the top one says run everything in this module. And so I include target. We'll run everything in that module. So if I'm working on some part of the system, I do want the front end test to run. And so I will run that. And then this is supposed to say tag target. So somebody tell me afterwards that I failed. And that means that it'll run just this feature. If I get rid of the module tag up at the top, it'll run the feature right below wherever you tag it. I use a tool called Mix Test Watch. Whoa, whoa, whoa. There we go. I use a tool called Mix Test Watch that automatically watches my tests and reruns things. And you can combine this include and exclude. So I can say exclude Wallaby, but include target, and include will always override exclude. So now I have it automatically run. I drop in a target and the test that I'm working on, or on the feature that I'm working on, even if I'm not in that file, and it'll rerun that one every time I make a change, which is really helpful. Making sure to turn off the browser, because otherwise it pops up while you're trying to type. Some of the other things that I do for making them fast. Skip the front end when possible. So I said that you frequently have to log in. Like most of your tests, if you are on a system that has a login, and who like doesn't write a system with a login anymore, you need to have, so you have to do that on the front end, but there's a lot you don't have to do. If you need to inject data, right, you don't have to go through the process of filling in the form for every piece of data that you need to, so go straight to the back end at any time that you can. Just drop it in the database and then run the front end like it had already existed long before you got there. So anything that's a given that doesn't have to be done on the front end, do it on the back end. Don't do that with what would be called a win. That's your action. It needs to happen on the front end. That's actually part of your test. But do that with your givens. This is Chad in the back says, don't test everything. Also, don't add him about it. Test the things that are really important. Some happy path, maybe some really important things, like test them fully. Do a lot of your tests, run through everything that can possibly happen in the browser that you can think of, but you don't have to test all the parts of the system. Things that maybe are incidental. You don't really care too much if the user sees it, is good to get rid of. And that's really it. We have 7 minutes left. I worked. Yes, I made it. Does anybody have questions, comments? Yeah.
What made you decide Wallaby over Hound?
I never used Hound. So I just tried Wallaby. Probably because I talk to Chris every week on the podcast. So I if you don't know, I do a podcast called Elixir Outlaws. And so I talked to Chris Keithley, who created Wallaby originally. And he will say like the API sucks and he wishes he had done it differently. But so I picked it because I knew what it was and it was quick to get going. Yes. Yes, yeah. Like, I'm a big fan of TDD. It's really my preferred way to work. I don't know very many people who do it all the time. I fail all the time at it too. I've been doing TDD since 2007, and I still constantly like don't do it. But I also am a big fan of throwing your work away. So I will write it and then just get clear and start over with tests sometimes. And sometimes I just push it out there without tests because I suck. Anybody, anything else? Jason.
For those CSS queries,
Mm-hmm.
you said you're generally targeting one element, and if it doesn't find it, it fails. What if it finds more than one?
So that count you can pass, and it typically has any, any's not really the right thing there because it's not any count, because if it counts 0, it doesn't say that it found any. So that seems, it reads well, but it feels weird to me because to me any means anything, and it's not anything. And that's the default, is one or more. If you are looking for an individual thing, so you try to click, it automatically adds count of 1, and it knows. And it will tell you, you get this nice error that says, yeah, I expected to find 1 and I found 3. It'll tell you how many. There's also a nice function called take screenshot that will take a screenshot of it and drop it so you don't have to run the browser headed. There are ways to run the browser headed. I can show somebody if they want to see it later. That can help with debugging too. But yeah, it checks for more than 1, but it knows when it should look for 1. Jeff. I know some people's names.
So I assume you work with front-end developers. Do they find these useful, and what are their experiences?
Yes, and frustrating.
Excellent.
Just like I do. Really, so I write most of these. They rarely write them. They will fix them. Sometimes I've had front-end developers say, you know what, I really want to learn how to do this. They're usually frustrating when I am in a hurry, so I don't go add roles. Like I have like a deadline that I'm trying to rush to, and I start using those things that I said don't use, or I start like throwing in a class because it's real easy to just type dot instead of typing role. I should probably make some kind of function that adds role to it, but it's still going to be more characters than the dot, so I will probably still end up doing the class sometimes. But yeah, they generally like them when it catches a real bug. And it does. It catches real bugs all the time. I have also had people comment them out when they caught a real bug and they didn't realize it because they were just so frustrated with it. So don't hit rerun. Always go fix it. Figure out why and fix it. That's the main thing. I'm just trying to give a few tools that help find that.
One of the challenges I've had when I was trying to do a live view app is that I was doing a game and I had multiple users, so I needed basically 2 sessions. Is that something we can do?
You can create 2 session out. It makes 2 different connections. I've only done it once.
Yeah.
But yeah, you just have like session 1, session 2.
Yeah.
Or whatever you want to call them. I've actually thought about renaming those to be like a user 1, user 2, because I don't know, session feels weird because I'm thinking of like being logged in. It's just overloaded for me.
Yep. Sweet, thanks.
Yeah, on the session, like, well, maybe, but is it easy to like to log in once and run a bunch of tests on that? Or,
I have done that to speed up the test suite. Sometimes I really do want there to be multiple users in the system. Yeah. And I don't even need like separate users running at the same time a lot of times, but I do want there to be a bunch of extra data in the database so that I am testing and I'm not showing you somebody else's stuff. Although not assertions are terrible. Like if I said, not thank you with a capital Y and this is our webpage, it would gladly pass, which is no good. So not assertions are generally not great. So like if you have a list of items and you're going to add something, look for it to be there, or actually removing is more important. So you have a list of items, find out how many you have, know how many are in your test, remove one, count how many are left, and it should be less than before, right? That's a good way. Also, so count along with looking at the things that are still in the list and making sure everything is in the list that you expect to be. So I have one less. I have Amos and Chad and Jeffrey and Jeff, and I'm going to delete Amos because that's what I should do. He's ruining my team. And so when I delete Amos, I check that Jeffrey, Jeff, and Chad are still there and that my count is now 3 instead of 4. So you have to combine all of these. Not assertions are generally, I can assert that it doesn't say supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, and yeah, it'll pass, but it didn't do me any good.
How do you kind of mentioned a little bit when you have like your users, I guess, or something like write stuff to or spec something like given when then.
Yeah.
Like how do you I guess how do you involve users in the language of the text, or how do you shield them from that?
So I will write it just as given when then, I don't show them the code. I have shown them code before when we needed to, and they can really read, like, visit this. Now, sometimes I have to explain what the query is, or like, this is a field. Like, they're filling in the username. They usually get that. But really what I do, how I get them to do it is they tell me something that they want, and I write it as a given when then and give it back to them and say, is this what you mean? Like that. Give you back what you're saying to me in a different way is what they look at me doing. But after a while, they just start to write them that way. If I've asked them to write it, it doesn't happen. But if that's how I present to them, after a while, they start to present that way to me. And it makes communication a lot faster because we do have a common, this is how we talk about doing something on the site. And it gets rid of a lot of ambiguity that way.
Is this useful towards domain-driven design where you can adopt ubiquitous language across
Absolutely.
stakeholders? Okay.
Absolutely, yeah. Because when you present it back to them, they will come in and they'll say, that's right, but so we're working on insurance software and we talk about brokers and they're like, oh, those are producers. We call them producers. Oh, so I can change that wording. And now I've gotten some context and wording that I didn't have before. And I think everything, we have subcontractors. They call them vendors in one of our projects. And so everything in our code is currently named subcontractors because I wasn't giving them this at the beginning. And now they're like, well, they're really vendors. So now we want to change all the wording everywhere. Even the front end says subcontractors. So that's really funny.
What about JavaScript error handling? Is there like a type to standard out? Or
I don't know.
what happens when error crops up?
I don't know. So I should probably lean on the test when I'm developing the JavaScript, but typically when I'm developing the JavaScript, I may already have the test written, but I won't even go look at the test because I will also be trying it in the browser myself a lot of times when I'm doing JavaScript, because I'm also using the JavaScript console in the browser frequently to play with things. I used to do a lot of JavaScript, and I do so little anymore that I really need that playground. So I don't look. So I don't know. I know that other frameworks that I've used in the past in other languages have spit out the JavaScript into the test failure if there's a JavaScript error. So it might do that, but I haven't tried it.
Have you ever tried plugging in like the visual regression stuff?
Not in Wallaby. That's a good idea, especially if you have take screenshot, you could write a little thing that would diff them. And when you set up your session, you can tell it what size the screen would be. So it will actually draw it to the right size. So but it only sees what it can see in the viewport. So if it's scrolled down, I don't know what that would do. I'm sure there's a way to pull everything out, but you might have to play with it or add that feature. I'm sure Mitch would love it if somebody added that. I don't know. Somebody's done Hound. Oh, he ran away. All right. Oh, you did Hound. Do you know if Hound can see more than the viewport? Okay.
You can probably tell one API to make it scroll down, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You can. And there's ways that you can send JavaScript to the front end to force it to do stuff too.
Will you ever find
I have like 200,000 Southwest Airlines points, so probably. Yeah, I keep telling my wife I'm going to take the whole family to like Hawaii and back and still have enough points to go just about anywhere. Maybe to Costa Rica now that they fly there. Be nice. Anybody, anything else? Oh.
What do you think about testing accessibility features?
Testing extensibility features?
Accessibility.
Accessibility features. I think it's a really great idea. I haven't used it for that. I used to write software for the government, so I had to write all of my stuff super accessible. And I wish I had had something like this at that point. I don't know how it would work with like testing for colorblind or screen readers, but there are things that you can do in here to say only like it won't let you click something that's not visible, for instance. And I've had other frameworks that actually did allow you to click things that weren't visible, especially ones that try to mimic a browser instead of really running a browser. So that's one of the things I like about this is I can do a live view test, and I can assert that something's in the HTML, but it will find it even if it's not visible. This, by default, you can say visible false, just like I did count, and it will look for something to be hidden, but by default, it'll only find visible things. Like Paul just came in and he's trying to pretend that he was here the whole time. Yeah, that's right. Anybody, anything else? Thank you very much.